Namaste everyone, and I welcome all of you on behalf of Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, Auro University, Surat, and our Beluji from the Auro Bharati. I'm so thankful that all of you are joining with us. And today we have with us Shiv Shankar Babuji, and he's passionate about the travel, photography, and Indian heritage, and particularly about temple architecture. In the past seven years, he has been learning about Indian heritage, temple art, and architecture, epigraphy, and lipis. He is heritage awareness speaker as a part of Tamil Heritage Trust, Chennai, and several other regional groups working on heritage awareness in Tamil Nadu. He specializes in temple architecture styles across India and in sculptures. He is also Government of India certified Incredible India Tourism Facilitator and regularly supports Mahabalipuram and Kanchi tours for TST and other groups. Babuji runs a YouTube channel, Babu for Heritage, which contains over 50 of his presentations on temple art and architecture, and also features curated videos of various heritage subjects by specialists. Babuji, I welcome you here, and it is our honor that you are presenting today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Before Shiv Shankarji, you start, I also just want to add one thing that I came to know about Shiv Shankarji's work, I think, few months back. And we had invited him for the national seminar we did on experiencing the spirit of India through cultural and heritage tourism. And since then, he and I have been in touch, planning, some other actual temple tours in Pondicherry. But we are just waiting for the temperatures to go down a little bit. So when the weather is a little better, so we'll be seeing more of him in Pondicherry, and he'll be talking more to us in person about temple. So Shiv Shankarji, looking forward to your presentation today.
Sure. Pranams to Mother Sri Aurobindo, and thanks to the Aurobindo Society and the Auro University in Surat, and thanks to a lot of interesting participants on the weekday at 7 o'clock who join in and listen to this. So thanks for giving us an opportunity to spread the awareness about our rich heritage and also how our temples have helped us as social media and as a social center. Today, we are going to continue on a sequence. Let me share the presentation. Two weeks ago, Dr. Beluji talked about Sri Aurobindo's views and hypothesis on a philosophical way in Indian art and architecture, in particular reference to temples. And she had a very beautiful collage of temples and how Aurobindo visualized the temple art and his views and the way he prophesized the temple as a medium of expressing our thoughts. Continuing on the thread and continuing on the aspects, today we are going to talk about the same views from a slightly different point of view. Primarily, today's focus will be on some of the views expressed by Aurobindo and how Sri Aurobindo has substantiated some of the points, and these points will be explained in detail by the practical points which are available in Agamic text and the treatises. So this is going to be around 45 minutes session max, I hope. And then we can have around 10 to 15 minutes worth of discussions. Before going into the full story, let me set the context on some of the views and remarks by Sri Aurobindo and why it has led to the points. Let us take a sample case. There is a very large, beautiful temple, but dilapidated, not in use for around 100 years, 200 years. And everybody said it is a cursed temple in 1900s. Very accursed temple, people are afraid. There are so many stories about it. It was done by Karigal Chola, it was done by gods, it was a cursed temple, worshipped for curing leprosy. So many stories. And the visitation is very, very poor. You can see the amount of vegetation and the amount of disuse and other things in the temple. But interestingly, the temple is full of strange writings which the locals could not read. And this is one of the stories leading to this temple was built by aliens and it is a cursed temple. Finally, in October 1887, this is the time where the British are firmly set and then they are in control. And then after bringing control into India, they start exploring India to rule and maintain and other things. So by this time, the Archaeological Survey of India has been formed, and then it's a chief epigraphist, Hulse. Mr. Hulse is famous for deciphering the earlier the Asoka inscriptions. And also he is the one who decrypted the inscriptions that are available in Malay and identified that it was relating to Pallavas, and then he unraveled the story on very little inscriptions that are available in Mahabalipuram. So he visits the temple and he sees that this writing is somewhat similar and slight variation of the earlier Brahmi and Grantha, which he has been exposed to in earlier explorations. So he sits down, and then this entire temple, from here all the way up to this entire circular piece is full of inscriptions. He goes through them and then analyzes, puts the thing and then decrypts, and finally he finds out and announces to the world that this is the great big Tanjavur temple, which is built by Rajaraja Chola I in 10th century. The inscription clearly says that I, Rajaraja, built this temple and I have made donations to this temple in my name, in my daughter's name, wife's name, and other things. And then it details the donations given by him and all his details. So the story is that for us, the locals, we don't know the history of our own temple, and then we don't know what is in it. We are not able to read what is written in the temple. The sad part is that somebody from the external world have to come, analyze and other things and announce it to us that this was your own Rajaraja Chola who built this temple in this year. So this is the context. This is the sad state where 1900s we were there. We have lost our heritage. We don't know what our heritage is. Half the temples are savage. If you see in North India, almost the major temples are damaged. Nothing is available. And then South, fortunately protected. And then they start exploring. And this is the story which is true for most of the big temples that are built around 11th, 12th, 13th century. They are the grand temples. Okay. So after this, British learn and start deciphering Ashoka Brahmi by the word Devanam Priyadasi, and then they decipher Tamil Brahmi Grantha and then identify the Pallava genealogy, and then 10th century Tamil and identify the Rajaraja Chola and all other related inscriptions, and clearly document and bring back the history which was lost to us, because the people at that age, around 1890 age, are writing in a different script, and then they are not able to read the old ones. And these are the people, with the help of you locals, they formalize the structure, they build the table, and then they rediscover the history for us. In this process, many temples were explored. And then the other good thing which they have done is, most of the temples, almost the big ones, the architectural drawings, the plans, natural pictures were there. And that is how we know that how our temples looked like in 1800 and 1900 century. So that is a contribution. And also, based on the extensive studies on temples, dynasties, based on the inscriptions which you have unraveled, so they put together Hindu temple architecture. Hindu temple architecture means this is the structure. You will have one dome, and then two mandapa, and then one pagoda, like that. They form a rudimentary structure of Hindu temple architecture. And based on this, a lot of books were written during the time in temple art and architecture, leading ones by Alexander Cunningham, James Burgess, Stella Cranbridge, and other things. These books are good in one aspect. They're very good in documentation, very good in the drawings, very good in the plan, but the interpretation is a challenge. Because the language, the form, when you have the sunshade kind of a thing, they put by their own name, Cornish, which they are familiar with. Like that, they were writing terms and concepts based on the medieval European architecture, which they are familiar with. Sadly, this trend also continued, and even the later period, English authors as well as many of the Indian authors also followed this. So almost all the major temple architecture, art architecture books were based on the British, Roman, and Greek architecture related concepts. So this is the challenge. This is one. If you see the context, when we talk about medieval period, this is around 9th to 13th century, 14th century. This is where the building starts becoming bigger in Europe, and we get some real tall churches and other things. One of the 13th century period cathedral in UK, the fourth largest and tallest one, built during the period, is 525 feet, done in stone and mortar. But however, this part, the spire broke in 1545, and this height was reduced to this. So this is the pinnacle of European architecture. When we compare to this, in India, what was happening? In 10th century, Rajaraja Chola built Rajarajeshwaram, which is around 210 feet, but it is only granite, no bonding, no mortar and other thing. It is pure stuck stone, no mortar, no bolt, nothing. And this is still there, handling several earthquakes and lightning strikes. And then only the second tier mandapa, which was built there, and some of the sculptures were damaged in Muslim invasion. Otherwise, it stands large as it is. So now, when people try to explain this temple in terms of terminology which is available in this temple, you can imagine the confusion and the cultural clash. Okay, so these are all diametrically opposite and structured, and without understanding the local logic and local terms and the purpose, the equation is on equivalent terms which are used here. So that is one challenge. And the focus. All this is from the words of Sri Aurobindo, and in his detailed treatise on temple architecture. He says that the Western mind is arrested, attracted by the form, lingers on it and cannot get away with the charm. It loves it for the beauty, and it is where the emotional and intellectual suggestions that arise, and then it confines the soul in the body. So for the Western mind, it is the shapes. It is the shape, size, and other things that is more critical, and its definitions are more on the shapes, not on the ratios. Whereas when it comes to the Indian mind, form doesn't exist except as a creation of the spirit and all its meaning and value from the spirit. Each line, arrangement of mass, color, shape, posture, every physical suggestion like your mudras, however many crowded, is opulent in, all of them go to a symbol or a message or a visualization which is supporting a emotion, idea, or image. So this is a very powerful, sensible reality which is a reflection of the spirit. And this is the spirit which excited these movements and aesthetic mind and passed them through into significant shape. This is the view expressed by Aurobindo on the Indian mind. So when we compare these two minds and when we are evaluating this, okay, you cannot compare with a Western mind on an Indian temple. So they say that it is crowded. They say that it is very barbaric. So his view, his position on this is to bring into an artistic look into a temple, Occidental memories or comparison with the Greek pantheon or an Italian church, or even the Gothic cathedrals of medieval France, like the one I showed you, though they have in something nearer to the Indian mentality, is to intrude a fatally foreign and disturbing element or standard in the mind, because the definitions are different. They are focused on the form. But this consciously or subconsciously is what almost every European mind does to a great or less degree. It subjects the work of a vision that's immeasurable to the test of an eye that dwells only on vision. So this is where the controversy comes in. When you are looking at an eye which focuses on form, whereas here we are looking at a story where every form is a representation of a spirit or an idea, we are in for a clash. The other point which he highlights is that there is no unity and it is a total cluttered collection of massive barbaric sculptures with no space to breathe, and there is no unity. So this is some of the observations which Sri Aurobindo was refuting, saying that the Indian art is something different. Now, what we are going to do is going into this aspect in detail and see how our Indian architecture and art in terms of temple building are representing the idea, the form, the idea, the emotion into a form, and how they have got a different kind of a significance. and how this has been there from ages. If you see the Western architecture, there are no very detailed mathematical calculation and treatises on that, whereas our agamas are full of mathematics and clearly mention that it can be only this way. So this is some of the common observations of the early foreign authors. In Indian architecture, there is no unity. There is as much there is no great effort at all. Only skill in execution, crowded and unrelated large detail. See, they got overwhelmed by the huge gopurams with so many sculptures and imagination. Even we are told by sympathetic judges that there are overloading of ornament and detail, however beautiful or splendid, stands in the way of unity. The attempt to load every rift with ore and absence of calm and unfilled places, no relief to the eye. But this is the observation of an untrained eye. Now, if you go into the agamas and the rules and say that where there is a rule, there is a sanity, there is a sequence, there is a meaning for all these things, then we will understand how our agamas visualizes this in a far more detailed structure, and there is unity and there is diversity. How this diversity or the complexity comes into one single oneness. So this is what Sri Aurobindo says. Since I do not understand how there can be a marvel of construction, whether lights are massive without any unity, but here is not even, it seems, a trace of it, or a mighty impressiveness without any greatness or nobility whatever, even allowing this to be Titanic and not an Olympian noblesse. So this, he put it in a succinct way, but we can see in practical terms, in reality, how this statement can be expanded in far more detail in multiple dimensions. In the dimensions of the symbolism of shapes, dimensions of ratios, the concepts of shapes, and also how there is some mathematics and rules involved in structure of temples and also sculptures. So this is the context which I wanted to set in terms of what Sri Aurobindo observed in his treatise. Now, when we talk about basic units, in Indian concept, it is not, a temple is not a collection of buildings. It is visualized, a Shiva temple is visualized as a collection of linga. Your Gopuram is a Stula linga, Dwajastamba is a Dwaja linga, like that. Your Mura linga is this one, and the temple top, the Vimana top is called Akhanda Lingam and the Garbhagraham. So each is visualized as a linga form by itself. This is one way of spiritual living, which is not there in the Western. It can be also visualized as the manifestation of 6 yoga chakras in a body, where it is Muladhara is corresponding to the Dwajastamba, and then Swadhisthana corresponding to Balipida, and Manipura corresponding to the Vagana Mandapa, Anaha corresponding to Mahamandapa, and Vishuddha corresponding to the Antarala, and finally Anga Chakra relating to the Mula Linga. So this way, there is a relationship and there is a visualization of the body, the yoga chakras, into the temple. So there is a spiritual element in addition to the construction element involved in it. This is one aspect. If you want to validate, you can take the example of a Tanjore temple where this is how it is. Your Gopuram is here, your Vimana is here. We have Mahamandapa and we have Dwajastamba, Balipida and everything. So this is how typically a temple will look like. This is how it is visualized as a collection of lingas or Mooladhara chakras. When we talk about temples, are temples there in early times? Yes. Were there like temples which were now? No. It has evolved over a period of time. It has changed so many ways in terms of the way it is structured, the materials used, the location, and everything. Earlier, men started with worshipping nature and then gradually expanded into worshipping weapons. Whoever is having the weapon becomes a king, and then the weapon is worshipped in the secluded place in the caves. So the natural caves becomes the worshipping place where there is no constructional activity. They identify a secluded place deep inside, and this is the temple. And when the people move over to the plains, the tree becomes a natural place where the temple worship happens with or without the roof. And slowly, as they become living in structured houses made of wood, mud, and mortar, the same thing is replicated for temples also. And gradually, once they familiarize in metals and then cutting technology, they go back to their natural caves and then start modifying into cutting caves, because this has got a better longevity than your wooden mortar brick usage. But everywhere, every time going to a hill and other things becomes a problem. So what they did is they started using the granite or the rock into manageable small bricks kind of a thing and started using constructed granite or rock based temples. This was a major step in construction where we see most of the temples that are built are still available even after 1,000 years. And after this, we have multi-story building, and then the concrete has changed everything. Now it is very easy to do any shape, any curve, any load, everything is possible. So from a nature worship, we have come to a flexible usage of concrete. But do we see all this in a real life? No. Because up to wood and mortar, whatever is there has been destroyed. So we don't see any wooden mortar except some old temples like in Mahabalipuram, where this is the 4th century brick and mortar remains of a temple. Whereas here, this is the modern day concrete temple in Vellore, the wooden painted temple. So the temples which we receive are mostly in the form of cutting caves and monoliths. All are stone temples. But these stone temples reflect a structure, a rule, a form, an ideology, which reflects the old temples which were built in wood, mortar, and brick 300 years earlier. So basically, they are mirror copies of wood temples and mud temples. So we can clearly say that even by 1st century, 2nd century of the Christian era, we have certain rules and norms and then some stipulations. How it is so? This is due to some amount of rules and stipulations which were provided in various treatises. These are agamas, where they say that for structure of building and structure of temple, structure of houses, there were certain rules which are prescribed. But do we get these books now? No. Primarily, the challenge is till 600, 700 CE, these were in the form of stanzas of Sanskrit, which were transferred from one group of Tapatis or builders to other group, by word of mouth as poems. Only in later 10th or 11th centuries, they started recording this in palm leaves. And what happened is, in 19th, 18th century, some of the leading libraries like Saraswati Mahal in Tanjavur, they started collecting all the palm leaves and started transcribing them into paper and other documentation. And this is how many of the agamas have been recovered. Some are recovered, some are not recovered, some are there in parts. So these agamas are the things stipulate how to build a temple, what kind of temples, what kind of forms, what kind of material, what is the rules, and how it can be done. So when you talk about this embodiment of knowledge, this is in multiple segments. One I talked about is agamas, which is primarily, there are two major agamas. We'll come about this in detail. First is Vaishnava agamas, where you have two major sectors, Vaikarnasa and then Bhadratra. In Shaiva agama, up to 28 agamas are there, and there are 109 upagamas. And for Sakta, 64 agamas are there. So this is one set of body of knowledge which talks about temple building. This is about Vastu Shastra and Devalaya Shastra. And there are certain rules where there are agamas where they talk about Vastu Vidya and Manushali Chandrika. Primarily, they talk about construction of temples and construction of houses. There are certain agamas which talks about what needs to be there. Vastu means what needs to be there in various directions and how to structure. Okay. And then Devalaya construction is a next segment. One is the base, how to build the base using Vastu, what needs to be there in what direction, that's the Vastu. And then whether you build it for Devalaya or for Manushalaya, the rules will be different. So there are certain agamas which talk about Pratima Lakshana, like sculpture, Saraswati Chitrakarma, Brahmi Chitrakarma, Sakladikara. So all this put together, we derive the temple architecture definitions. So when you talk about these agamas, the earlier agamas, Purva Kamika agama was there. Some of the things were reflected in Mayamatam and then Kashyapam, Masaram and Vishwakarmiyam, like that. Over the period, new agamas started developing, which are refinements of the earlier one, with more features, more refinements, more variations added. So this is the big picture on how much of documentation is there, rules is there for building of temples and sculptures. When you talk about the shapes, when we talk about agamas, this also has got some concepts. When you talk about concepts, there is a concept of Dravida. So the first one we'll talk about Nagara. When we talk about Nagara, the Nagara in different connotation, different context means different things. Okay, it may mean north in direction, in shape, square, or when you talk about Nagara shape, it is square or rectangle with 4 corners, and it reflects Brahma. In Guna, it gives Satvika Guna, and it gives action of Srishi. And then this is for Saumya or calm gods. The next set of shapes is the Dravida shape. Okay, when I say Dravida, it doesn't mean the political group, which is in political aspect. Okay, this as a direction means south, and it reflects the 2 shapes, hexagon, octagon, and further multigons. It reflects Murti, Vishnu, and then it Rajasa Guna, and then Sthiti, stability, and Ukradevas for aggressive ones. So these are aggressive shapes, itself common shapes. And the next thing is the Vesara shape, which is attributed to Shiva. All the edges one or the curved ones are Vesara shapes. Shiva, Tamasa, Samhara or Samhara Devata. So we can call a temple a Vesara temple, or a Shikara alone a Vesara Shikara, or it is a Vesara Desa temple. Vesara Desa temple means Middle India temple. Like that, depending on the context, you derive on this. Okay, so this is the context given to the shape and the logic behind the shape. Now, when we talk about agamas, this primarily is a ritual where it is a way of self-realization, and it has got 4 components. First one is, the top one is Jnanapada or Vidyapada, where it gives, for Shiva means what is the theoretical background of Shaiva concepts. And then next one is Yogapada, how to concentrate. Third one is a Kriyapada, focusing on action, where worshipping rituals, how to build the temple, and then what is the location, what are the images, what kind of images, and all this process-oriented stuff will be available here. And then Charyapada will be normally rituals and ways of life to adhere for the Agama. So whether it is Shaiva Agama, Sakta Agama, or Saura Agama or something, all Agamas will have these 4 components. In this, the Kriyapada is the area where they talk more about how the temple should be structured and what kind of murtis will be there. So this has been there for a long time. It is not something which has come new. So for Shaiva, we have this kind of Agamas. For Shaiva Agama, Kamika, Karanagama, Subrabheda, Vatala, like that. There's a huge collection. For Vaishnavas, we have Vaikanasa, Atri, Maharishi, Bhrigu, Kashyapa. And for Pantrata, 108, Iswara, Padma, Lakshmi, Ahir, Budnya, Samita, like that. There are so many various things. Similarly, for Sakta, we have Subhagamas, the Kaulagamas, Mishragamas, the Mishra means mixed. So like that, for Saura, for Ganapatya, for Kaumara, Agamas are there. So all these will have some component talking about how the temples are structured and how the deities are to be defined. Now, we are taking a sample of Mayamata, which is written in 7th century CE, based on Purva Kamika. This has got 36 chapters. And let us have a preview of how a Vastu Shastra or a Mayamata or a Agama, what all it talks about. It talks about how dwelling sites need to be selected for a temple, okay, and how we need to check the site, whether it is a good site or a bad site, and then dig a hole, wait for 1 day whether water seeps in, and then after some time put back the sand, and if it fills up below that, then it is a better site, and if it overflows, then it is not a good site. Like that, there are a lot of rules which talks about how to select a site, and then how do you clean up the site, and then measurements, how you take a measurement, and then how to write a base plan chakra. Then the Sankusthapana is a very important step. You see, in many temples in south or even in north, on a particular special day, the sun in the early morning falls on the linga of feet. Okay, how it is done? It is alignment for a particular day, for a particular sun movement, so that there is no obstruction and it falls cleanly on the entire stretch. For that, we need to know clearly the exact north point in a particular location. How they do it in olden days without compass is the way of Sankusthapana. They put a stick, they measure the shadow for Uttarayana to Dakshayana for 1 month. And then they identify what is the central spot and identify true east and true north. So this is how we do. And then you, by mandalas, you prepare the base plan of the grid where the temple is going to sit down. And after that, it talks about offerings and how to plan villages and towns and where each component of the village need to be there. So it is the Vastu side of the design. And when it comes to Devalaya, it talks about Vimanas. Vimana means nothing but excellent measurement, ultimate measurement. Vimana. Mana means measurement. So this is pure calculation, how many stories, and for each story, how many dimensions, and then how each dimension need to be measured. And for example, the situation is, if your base is 5 measures, your height can be 1 time, 1.5 time, 1/4 time, or up to 2 times. So this is the 4 options available. Like that, they give a lot of options. And then they talk about each component of this foundation, your adhyatana and your base, pillars, and then roof, and how joinery. Joinery is a very important thing. Now it is not relevant, but in olden days when wood was the primary material, joinery is very critical. Suppose if the temple has got more than 1 stories, how to construct upper levels, and for each stories, what is the measurement and the form to be done, and the mandabas, gopuras, and then pavilions and the other things. So for each of one, what is the definition, what is the variation is given in exhaustive detail. See, it is 3,300 slope. And there is another section for houses. Houses, what is the houses for 3 sudras and other things, and then how to enter royal palaces and doors of the design. And it also talks about Pratima Lakshana, how Vagana should be designed, how Sayana or Asana, the bed or the chair should be done. What is the definitions for Linga? If you have a pedestal, what is the definition for pedestal? And there are sections for renovation. When there is a damage, how to do the rectification. And there is a section on iconography. This is a very interesting section where say that when we talk about Dakshinamurti, what are the features? What do you have in right hand, left hand, first hand, and second hand, and then how you will be seated, all the details. So this entire definition, imagine, is available from 7th century onwards in full form. So that means that this would have taken evolution of 4-5 centuries, and that means that even from the 1st, 2nd centuries, we have some rudimentary form of rules for building temples. So this is not something where you just like that start building things. Right. Earlier we talked about shapes. Okay, square, rectangle, and this one. So this is this shape. This is the Nagara shape, right? Square. And this is related to Brahma. And this is octagon related to Vishnu. And this is circle related to Vesara or Rudrapaga. If you look at Shivalinga, this is the unification of all this. This is where the unification comes, where all the 3 character shapes together. If you see the Shivalinga, it has got 2 parts. One, the rod and the base. The rod, 1/3 will be inside the buried inside, which will be of square shape, and the one which is covered by the pedestal is of octagon shape, and what we see as Bana is the Rudrapaga. So this is the unification of Shiva, Vishnu, Rudra, and with Shakti as the pedestal. This concept of unification of shapes and God and power is consistently deployed in almost all over the place in the temple. You see a pillar. Many of the pillars will have a combination of these three shapes: square, octagon, and circle. This is a Rudra pillar. And you see a Vimana. You see rectangle shaped Vimanas, and then octagon shaped Vimanas, circular shaped Vimanas, like representation of a Sthula Linga. And this is a rare picture. You are seeing inside the whole of the Bragadiswara temple. On top of the Linga, this is the bowl, empty space inside the grand Vimana. Here also the Linga shape is implemented. What starts as a square, gradually it reduces into a octagon shape, and then slowly it goes and finally merges into a circle. So this is also a form of Linga structure which is available in the inside of the thing. This is what they call it as the Akanta Linga. Now, we saw the thing. When you look at ground plan also, these are the ground plans normally used for any temple. Square, rectangle, hexagon, octagon, or apsidal temple. This is what we call as Gajaprishta, or either with the racetrack type of temples, and ellipse or circle. Okay. Again, this forms to the three types of shapes. This is Nagara shape, it is Dravida shape, and this is Vesara shape. And again, it is aligned to the power of the temple, the deity who is going to be in the temple, and all this energy is aligned with the shapes and the options. Now we are seeing how a temple or a Vimana is represented like a body. Like our body, which we can easily split into 6 parts. Our house or our temple, Vimana, also can be split into 6 parts. One is your legs, which is called as Adhishana. The second one is the body, which is called the Vitti. Here, this is the body, and this is the body of the temple, which is called the hall. And the third part is the shoulder, and this is the shoulder here. The shoulder here, and this is the shoulder. This is called the prastara. And our neck part, the fourth neck part, here you can see the clear inside neck part, and this is the inside part. And the head, the bulbous head is there, and then this is the head part, top part, one time. And there is a stupi. This is our hairstyle. So how you put it like this or like that, the stupi is there. So this is an example of how a temple or our house can be visualized. This is Manushalaya, it is Devalaya. Can be visualized as a body. So in a typical temple in South Indian Dravida architecture, you have this 6 parts mandatory. This is called Shatanka temple, 6 components. So there are a lot of details, but I'm restricting this primarily because it is an introductory stuff. So what we are seeing here is single story Vimana, where there is only one tier after this. Suppose if you want to make it a very big tall structure, if you keep on just boost it multiplied by 5, it will look very ugly. Because this will be very broad, and then the shikara will be very, very bulbous, and the neck will stand out like anything. So what they do is, they add haras, like how you add more and more jewelry to look rich, they add haras. So this is the hara, you have seen the other parts. This is the hara they add to increase heights. Here, this is a very rich temple. In addition to the base, they have 1 hara, 2 hara, 3 hara, 4 hara. So 4 stories. So this gives a beautiful look. And also it gives some rules and this one. So this is basically like putting 4 temples, one inside other, and then putting it as a stack. So this is the logic behind it. This kind of visualization is not there in Western temples. It is like more like addition of shapes and other things. And this central shaft goes all the way up to the sanctum inner wall. So this will be the size of the sanctum inner wall, and gradually, like I showed the other picture, from here it will go down slowly and then convert into a round to the size of the Shikhar. So this is how it will look. Even these haras, they have a rule. This is where the beauty of the architecture is there. The ones in the corner, the marked K, are always square, rectangular, small temples. The ones in the middle is called Sala, and then they are always rectangular shape, and this is square shape. Okay. They don't come in the corners. Square will not come in center. And then in between, there is an apsidal kind of an apsidal means one semicircle and one square. It is called Panjara. And then this will come in between. They normally come in between these two, and then they don't come in the corners. And then in between, there is a recession where there are some arches. See, you can see some recessions here. There is some ornamentation, which is the arch, Sutra Nasika. So if you visualize this hara is nothing but a garland. Okay, if you visualize this as a garland with roses in the middle and with the yellow sambangi on the corner, and then you have some other white lilies in between, and then you have leaves interpressed, and the wall and the background is a thread. So it's a hara around the temple, and then you have multiple haras. This is how it is done. So if you visualize this, to the Westerner, it is a jumble of so many things stacked. But when you see like this as a hara with its own rules and other things, it has got beautiful meaning, it has got shape, and all this convey shape. This is stability. Rectangle is stability. It is always at the center. This is tamasa on the safe on the corner. And now the Vesara shape is active in the middle. It is getting controlled. So there is lot of activity related information and energy in a temple. So let us see whether this rule is repeated. The same rule is repeated, rectangle and then center. And then here you can see the stuff on side angle and that floor also. So the rule. So next time when you go to any temple, particularly Dravida temple, you can validate this rule. Right. Now, having seen this kind of complexity and visualization, right? Now you know that temple is not a building where there is a huge ornamentation. Another variation here from the Western concept is that whereas in Western concept, the religious places are typically places of worship. Whereas here, it is a place of living where the God actually lives. So from morning, waking up, breakfast, coffee, up to the night dinner, and then midnight movie, everything is there for the God in process. Everything is there. And that is where it is in a different kind of a dimension. Now, there was a question. You go to South India, you see any temple from a distance, you get confused. Each temple looks same to you. Any Vimana or any Gopuram, it looks same to you. There is no odd ones, there is no wild ones. The look and feel is same. How it is possible? This is because of the ratios. Now, what they use for ratios is One, there is an absolute measure where they take 8 rice grains, which is a yavai, and from there they build this 8 grains is an viral, a finger width, and then 24 viral is 1 mulam, like this. So normally a mulam is this much, 1 full hand length. It may measure up to 2.75 feet. So based on all your ratios, for example, I said in a temple, we have 6 parts. Okay. For all the 6 parts, they will have a ratio. For example, if your width is 4 modem, 4 units, then your height can be 4 or 1.5 times or 2 times or 1/3. Here they have taken 1/3. So width is 4, height is 9. Then they divide that 9 units into 10 parts and distribute to each component. This is for a particular class of Vimana called Jaitam. There are 4 classes of Vimana, for example. Each class, the distribution ratios will be different. So your plan will be calculation based on this. Adhisthana, 1 part of the 9, and then your wall will be 2.5 parts of the 9. Like that, there are calculations. All this is mentioned in slokas. Each sloka will talk about this is the component, this is the ratio. Because there are any number of slokas for each component. Now, this is for a big temple. Coming to the next level, when we take about Adhisthana, there is a Padma Bandha Adhisthana, there is 1 part. So, whatever is attributed, this 1 unit is divided by 25 parts and distributed to the individual components. So, this much detail they have given in components. For example, this is the components of the Adhisthana or the base. Even for that, there are given calculations. So, when your width of the sanctum is 20 meters, your entire, from this 1 measure, your entire calculation can be built for the entire temple. So, the ratios are fixed. This is the reason why wherever you go, from wherever you see, whatever big is, whatever small temple, they look alike because the ratios are same. This is what the agamas are mentioning. There are slight variations, options given, but the look and feel is same. This is the reason for that. You go for a Jain temple, you go for a roadside temple, the ratio is same. This is the reason. From when you go to multi-tier temples, for each tier there are ratios like this, and then the calculation becomes complex. Now we are coming to the last part, another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Iconography. The next part is that we have going to temples, we see a lot of sculptures. Shiva, sitting posture, Dakshinamurti, standing Vishnu, or Brahma, they all look alike in whatever temple you go, with minor variations. Okay, there are no odd things. Again, this is defined with agamas and then defined in various things with energy. When you talk about iconography, we can have so many parameters. What material used, what kind of form used, standing, sitting, or the dimensions, what kind of thickness measurement, and then whether they are standing, sitting, slanting, or what kind of signals they give, and what kind of embellishments they have, headgears, weapons, circum. So all this is mentioned in agamas, like I mentioned earlier, in various components. So if you see the sources for these agamas, as usual, you have Vastu Shastras, Shilpa Shastras, Agamas, which you have seen. In addition, because of Shilpas, we have various gods. Various gods are defined in different ways in Puranas. So, when we talk about Puranas, we have a huge list of Puranas from 350 to 750, the first set of Puranas. for Shiva, Brahma, Kurma Purana, Matsya Purana, and other things. And then Markandeya Purana, Varaha Purana, like that. And then second set, in the medieval period, Bhavishya Purana, Devi Linga Purana, Shiva Purana, Bhagavata Garida Purana, like that. Brahma, Surya, Agni. There are multiple. And then the later Puranas refined, added more variations, more things, and like Saura Purana and other things. So these Puranas talk about the various avatars, shapes, and what each god shape and other things will look like. Now, coming to iconometry, in Agamas, they mention ratios for this also. Here, this is a base measurement. How they take is, they take the face length as one base. 1/12 of the face is one finger. This is a relative measure, so that in this ratio, when you have a 8 tala sculpture and 10 tala sculpture, the shape will be lean or fat. So like this, the Puranas mention and the Agamas mention measurements for each of this. The mana, pramana, width, thickness, and the perimeter in the particular upamana, inner capacity, lambamana, what is the ultimate vertical height. All this for a particular deity is given in slokas. So that is the reason why, whether you have a small murti or you have a large murti or a gigantic one, like the one in Tirupati or something, they look alike because the ratios are same. And again, for various types of gods, the length or width is different. For example, Dasatala means you take 10 ratios and split up into the chest, body, head, and other things. This is a Dasatala. So it's a very, very tall and lean figure, usually meant for the senior gods. The wives are normally slightly lower than Navatala. If you have two statues of 1 meter, the Shiva statue will be slightly leaner, and Parvati statue will be slightly lower and fatter. But that is the difference. And then kings are given in Ashtatala, Saptatala human, and then Shattala, Vamana, and others. Ganapati, very short and fat, so he gets only 5 ratios. So your ratio for this and that, you can see the width here, the width and height comparison. So naturally, Ganapati always consistently looks in the same way in whatever structures we have. Similarly, Ganas are 4 talas. So with this ratio and by application of this tala measurement, it is a relative measure. If you want to get a 10-meter statue, 1 into 10, and then the same look and feel statue will be there. So this is how Indian sculptures have the consistency and the correct iconography, which are mentioned by Agamas from age-old things. So this comes from the shape and also the measurements. In Kamika Agama and other Agama, they say when a temple is done with perfect measurements, the god automatically comes and resides there. That is the ultimate sloka. So here it is a mathematical extreme, not something which you can see in Western world. Only when you understand this complexity, you will start appreciating the hugeness, oneness at the same time. What is the measurement? Only this measurement. But from this, the entire temple is planned. Similarly, for your temple, the base of measurement is only 1 pole. Every other measurement can be derived from that. So it looks for uniformity, it gives consistency, It has got unity in terms of diversity. For example, one base can have multiple ratios. There is slight variation, but consistency is always there. So this is how a temple agama is done. So to end with Sri Aurobindo's quote, these sacred buildings are the signs, the architectural self-expression of an ancient spirit, religious culture, and the recent behavior. Ignore the spiritual suggestions, the religious significance, the meaning of the symbols and indication. Look only for the rational and secular aesthetic mind. And it is vain to expect that we shall get to any true or discerning appreciation of this art. So, what I request all is to spread the message of the underlying spiritual and religious culture, the meaning of the shapes, how shapes are integrated into components, components integrated into buildings, and then ultimately giving rise to a mathematically perfect abode of God, where God resides. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity to learn. So if you want to see further videos or any details, you can always refer to my YouTube channel, Babu for Heritage, or you can contact me in any of the connections here. Thank you all. I'm open for any questions.
I think amazing presentation. You have given drishti to see temple. It's like, you know, I was totally ignorant. I used to get amazed when I used to see the temple, the architecture, the subtle work done so, you know, so many years back. And today you justify in such a way that it is so scientific, you know, there is nothing like just simply imagination. And so beautiful. Thank you so much. This is a great presentation. And I think you are absolutely right. We should spread the word because that is very important. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, this was marvelous, Shiv Shankarji. Thank you so much for walking us in detail through all these. You know, it was just very interesting to see how you started off saying how temple is about, you know, like a Purusha and the whole chakras, the yogic significance behind, the spiritual significance behind a temple architecture. And then at the same time, we have such precise calculations, precise mathematics. So such a beautiful blend of the subtle and the more outer, you know, the mathematics, the engineering marvel that these temples are, and yet so aesthetically sublime. So the spiritual ambience there, the spiritual vibration there, even in the temples that are non-functioning, like, you know, that were done more as experiments. For example, like what 2 weeks ago, I talked about the Patadakal experimentation, Badami, Aihole. Even there, in you know, you still find that same calming vibration. So it's just so amazing because everything was done with that intention of making it a precise abode, perfect abode for the divine, as you said at the end. So it was just very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's the concept of Vimana, where we have an excellent mathematical model for the God to reside. And interesting, the base number which you arrive for the Garbhagriha has to be a multiple of a particular number. How they arrive at the particular number is an astrology part, where they take the nakshatra of the location, nakshatra of the name of the deity, and I'll do all the calculation. There is a table. I have gone through the Mayamata in full. So from the table, they select certain numbers. And for each number, they got a prediction. If it is 8, bad for the sponsor. 9, it will damage in 10 years. Like that, there is a prediction. So out of this, you have an option of selecting some 4 or 5 numbers. So the Garbhagraha base width has to be a multiple of this number. So for selecting the base measurement, that itself is a very, very scientific and spiritualistic process. Once you have the base number, then all the calculations are multiples of this. Okay, that itself is something specific to the sponsor, specific to the location, specific to the time where we start the puja. So many calculations are there. I'm not going into this in this presentation because it will make it too complex. This is the logic.
But there is a question from Rishabh. Rishabh, do you want to unmute yourself and share this, or he wants to?
Sure, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you first of all for such a beautiful presentation, sir. And I would like to know a bit more about the ratios which you talked about, which are used in temple architecture. So I want to know whether there is specific significance of a particular ratio. I mean, why that ratio is used instead of any other ratio? Is there significance of a particular ratio? And are there any other references you would like to point to understand a bit?
Treatises like Mayamata or Bruno Dagins has written a book on English translation of Mayamata. Okay, there also they mention all these calculations. So basically, the ratios is, one example is, if the width of the sanctum is 1 meter, okay, height can be for a particular type of temple. For example, Vijayam means beautiful temple. Okay, Sri Vijayam. It gives wealth. So for the temple, they say that the ratio can be 1, 1.5, 1.25. Only these 3 ratios for the height. Okay, for a different type of what I call as an Abhasa Vimana. Okay, the ratio can be 0.75, 1 or 1.25. It will look like this. Wide but small. You got the point. In some of the things like Sri Vijayam, grand and tall, the ratio is given as 1.5, 1.75 or 2. So the shape will be tall with respect to the base. The base is same, the shape will be different for different type of Vimanas, primarily because your ratios are changing. Once you start understanding and putting down these numbers, you will start visualizing this in a far more easier manner. It requires a lot of examples, but the fundamental is everything. Once you have the width of the Garbhagraha, from there you can keep on deriving the multiple things. They are giving options. It is like your menu options. Like when you go to when you are making a biryani, how many spoons of salt? One spoon. So if you want it spicy, add something more. Okay, how much of vegetables you put? Okay, somebody wants much vegetables, somebody don't want vegetables. Like that, each component you start to have 3 or 4 variations. And Mayamata also says that a prudent and sharp and an innovative sculpture can take a variation from this, but ensure that it doesn't damage the overall issue. They also do the exception class. So these can be read in any of the books, Mayamata and other things. And there is an English translation available by Bruno Dagins, Mayamata. You can search in the web. And
Sure, thank you so much.
Yeah, I have 1 or 2 other comments or questions, but I also am seeing the time. Maybe I'll ask you separately. Specific question about the Tanjavur temple, the Brihadeshwara temple. Somebody had told me, but maybe I'll just message you separately and ask you that question separately, because I am seeing it's already 17 minutes past 8. So,
No problem. You can see any of you, if you need any guidance on what are the temples to visit in Tamil Nadu, at least in Tamil Nadu, I know a little. Okay, I can guide, particularly Tanjavur temple or something. I can also guide. I can give a sequence on what to see and how to see. And there are presentations also about Tanjavur temple, which I did. I can also share. It will walk through the key aspects of Tanjavur temple. So like that, I am planning to do 2 more for Gangaikonda Chodapuram, Dharasuram also. That
wonderful.
hope I keep.
Wonderful.
So thank
Both.
Maybe I think
Um,
if possible, I don't know, because I'm more interested in knowing about my matam. I've heard a lot about it because that is the reference point whenever, there is a discussion of, architecture or temple architecture. Somebody told me a very beautiful story that somebody wanted to build the house earlier. There is a reference in my matam, whether, I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly. They said
They
that
got
they do puja and even they ask insect that now you go to you find other house because I want to establish, I want to make my house over here. So such a beautiful text we have, but we are not so much familiar. Our education system has not given the chance to read that. So maybe, if you can come again and if you can shed some light by using that text.
Sure, we can do that. We can do some more details on Mayamata or something. And general temple components. I usually take 7-day course on South Indian temple architecture. If your university is interested, I can also do this for you as a very good initiative.
Sure.
That will be a good opportunity for handling. This is off-campus training, and or it can be in-campus training also, depending on how you structure it. We are already doing some amount of program with Amrita University and some of the other universities. We can do that.
Right. Sure, certainly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shiv Shankarji, again. And thank you to all who have joined. And we will be in touch soon. So we'll meet next week. Kiranji, I'll maybe get in touch with you in a couple of days to plan for next. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.